Report.
Well, good evening. I'm James McPherson, filling in for Andrew Bolt, who is back next week. Coming up tonight, the government's failure to keep the community safe is once again in the spotlight, with 2 more of those free detainees being arrested. Religious leaders are calling for a tougher stance on hate speech, but is the government listening? Labor's foreign policy has been slammed as the situation in the Red Sea grows more dangerous. And if you were wondering just how woke universities are, wait until you see students agreeing to donate money to kill innocent Jews. The shocking footage later in the show. But first, someone needs to tell Australian cricketer Usman Khawaja that grandstand is a noun, not a verb. For the 3rd match in a row, all the pre-game talk is about the Pakistan-born batsman's bid to score political points. He's paid to score runs. Khawaja made headlines before the Perth Test when he revealed he was planning to wear shoes protesting the war in Gaza. He wrote, "All lives are equal and freedom is a human right" on his shoes, insisting he wasn't taking sides in the conflict. Well, the fact that he wrote his inane slogans in the colours of the Palestinian flag would argue otherwise. And that he didn't highlight the conflict when Israeli citizens were being slaughtered, but only when Hamas was in the firing line, would also suggest he's not playing with a straight bat. When the International Cricket Council refused him permission to wear the shoes, he wore a black armband instead. He said the armband was for a personal bereavement, but he wouldn't say what that bereavement was. Well, it seemed pretty obvious to most people that he was wearing the armband in solidarity with Palestinians and in defiance of the International Cricket Council. There's a pattern here, isn't there? Khawaja's shoes were non-political, though written in Palestinian colours, and Khawaja's armband was personal, though he refused to elaborate. Khawaja forgets he's not the only one who can play spin. We see this for exactly what it is, and so too did the ICC. They reprimanded him for wearing the armband without having first gained the necessary permission. Predictably, the batsman claimed he was being persecuted. And if you believe that, you probably believe that Jesus was a Palestinian and that queers are rock stars in Gaza. A mob chant "Gas the Jews" in Sydney, while another mob throw rocks at a Caulfield synagogue, while yet another mob chase Jews from their Melbourne hotel. But the real victim is Usman Khawaja. Spare me. Khawaja is an aggressive opening bat and a passive-aggressive political campaigner. Like I said, someone needs to explain to him grandstand is where one sits, not a thing one does. Prior to the Boxing Day Test, all attention was once again on the batsman, who was then demanding the right to display a dove on his shoes and bat. Usman had this to say at the time.
The reason I'm doing it is because it hit me hard when I'm looking at my Instagram and I'm seeing kids, innocent kids, videos of them dying, passing away. That's what's hit me the hardest. I just imagine my young daughter in my arms and the same thing. I get emotional talking about it right now again, and for me, that's the reason I'm doing this. I don't have any hidden agendas. I don't get anything out of this. I just feel like it's my responsibility to speak up on this.
Most people are well aware by now of Usman's views, and we all understand exactly what's happening in Gaza, where not incidentally, more than 100 Israelis are still being held hostage by the terrorists, supported by 75% of the population. Of course, it's hard to find space to write those details on a pair of cricket shoes. Khawaja is testing the patience of sports fans who admire his elegant stroke play, but just don't want to be lectured on Middle Eastern politics when he's meant to be representing Australia. And to be honest, we don't like being played off a break, being told he's not taking sides when he clearly is. Well, last night at Kirribilli House, where the Prime Minister was hosting a function for the Australian and Pakistani cricket teams, Anthony Albanese decided to get involved. After paying tribute to David Warner, who's about to play his final match in Sydney, the PM added this.
I do want to acknowledge lastly as well your opening partner, Usman Khawaja, for the courage that he has shown in standing up for human values is what he has done, and it has shown courage, and the fact that the team has backed him in as well is a great thing.
Elbow's definition of courage is writing a pro-Palestinian slogan on your shoe? Seriously, give me a break. All that time Anthony Albanese spent out of the country is starting to show. If the PM had been paying any attention to what's happening in his own backyard, he would surely know it doesn't take much courage to write a slogan on your shoes in Palestinian colours. But try walking around any capital city in this country at the weekend while holding an Israeli flag and see how you fare. That would take courage. Try walking around Anthony Albanese's electorate wearing a Star of David around your neck and see what kind of reception you get. I guarantee it won't be as warm as the one Usman Khawaja got at Kirribilli House last night. Well, a big show ahead. Let's get straight into it with Home Affairs Minister, or rather Shadow Home Affairs Minister, I'm getting ahead of myself, James Paterson. Senator, before we move on to other issues, just want to get your reaction to the PM congratulating Usman Khawaja for his courage. What did you think of those comments?
My view, James, is that politicians like myself and the Prime Minister would be well advised to stay out of regulating the lawful conduct and speech of sports players like Usman Khawaja. He's entitled to have whatever views he likes and express them consistent with Cricket Australia's policy. The reason why I think we should stay out of it is because sometimes you get caught out being inconsistent. You might remember that 3 years ago in 2019, there was another sports star who was expressing views publicly. This time it was a rugby player, not a cricket player. This time it was a Christian and not a Muslim. And this person, Israel Folau, got a very different response from the then opposition leader, Anthony Albanese, when he expressed his sincerely held beliefs. He was sacked from his role, and then opposition leader Anthony Albanese called him reprehensible. So on the one hand, you're reprehensible for expressing your sincerely held views, and on the other hand, you're courageous. And I think that shows an inconsistency from the Prime Minister, and he'd be well advised to stay well out of this sport and politics.
Indeed. Well, let me talk to you about another of the government's failures, and that's their complete failure to respond properly to the High Court ruling that saw 148 asylum seekers and criminals released into the community. No supervision. The government was left scrambling. It's been a total mess. Already 5 of those have been arrested, one for alleged sexual assault, another for allegedly making contact with a child without a reasonable excuse. And today we find out another 2 have been arrested. Brand new year, same old problems.
Australians will be deeply concerned that while Anthony Albanese's ministers are having a nice holiday, the criminals that they let out into the community haven't taken a break at all from the crimes that they've committed against the Australian people. And the whole reason why the Parliament rushed through before Christmas a preventative detention regime, which the Coalition had been urging the government to do for weeks and weeks and weeks, and they finally agreed to do, was for circumstances like this. We foresaw a time when some of these people released from indefinite detention would reoffend in the community against Australians, and we thought that they should be locked up if they did so. Well, as we stand here today, not one person has been preventatively detained under that regime that we passed before Christmas. So the question is, where's the Minister for Home Affairs? Where's the Minister for Immigration? What are they doing? Why haven't they applied to the courts to get these dangerous criminals off the streets where they can't pose a risk to the Australian community?
Well, I think we know where they are. They're all on holidays, aren't they?
Well, sadly, I think that is the reason why no action has been taken to protect the community. But I remember these politicians, when they were in opposition, were highly critical of, for example, the former Prime Minister Scott Morrison for taking a holiday. So they're hardly in a strong position to be failing to do their own jobs because they're on holidays, particularly when it comes to something as fundamental as the safety of the Australian community. Really, I think they need to be back in the office, back at work, getting these people off the streets so that Australians can feel safe again.
Indeed. Let's change tack slightly. I want to ask you a question, and give me a second to set this up. But what do you have to say in this country to get arrested for hate speech? The Australian reported overnight that an Islamic cleric gave a sermon on New Year's Eve describing Jews as, and I quote, descendants of pigs and monkeys. Here he is.
These worshippers of Iblis, yes, the descendants of pigs and monkeys, are stealing the organs of your brothers and sisters. It wasn't bad enough that they killed them, they also want to take their organs. They took their houses, they took their lands, and now they want their organs. But we want to watch fireworks.
And the centre's cleric, Abu Assad, has form. Here he is in October.
Our brothers and sisters in Gaza are being killed, annihilated by the descendants of apes and monkeys, of swine and monkeys.
Vilifying people as thirsty work. This comes as police drop their investigation into another Muslim cleric, Brother Ismail, who told his Sydney congregation there would come a day when even the trees would help people to kill Jews. We showed that clip on the program last night. Senator, it would be easier to get a reduction on your power bill under this government than to get arrested for hate speech, wouldn't it?
Sadly, I think that's exactly right, James. As you pointed out, this year's repeated behaviour from these two clerics. They have been engaging in the most reprehensible extreme rhetoric and what appears to me to be very clear incitement to violence against people in our community on the basis of their faith. It should have no place in Australia. It should be condemned by every political leader. And even better than that, the police and our prosecutors should follow through with the laws that are already on the books at the state and federal level and throw the book at people who are engaging in this irresponsible rhetoric, because I'm deeply fearful that this rhetoric will lead to very real violence in our streets and our communities. And when that happens, we'll all feel terrible and wonder, how did it happen? Well, we shouldn't wonder how it happened. We let people get away with this inflammatory rhetoric, this incitement to violence. We didn't enforce the law. They continue to do it. And somebody was inspired to undertake an act of violence as a result.
Well, I want to ask you about that because police investigated some of those comments and said, no, it didn't meet the threshold of hate speech. Is this a lack of courage on behalf of law enforcement and government, or is there problems with the law that need to be addressed?
I find it very difficult to understand how this conduct does not meet those thresholds. We've passed extensive laws against this kind of conduct at both the state and the federal level over a number of years. It is unlawful in this country to incite someone to commit an act of violence against someone else for any reason, but including for their race or their religion. It is an offence in this country to use a carriage service to menace and harass someone. A carriage service includes the internet. So putting up content on the internet which is menacing or harassing towards members of the community is also an offence. I don't understand why police and prosecutors haven't laid charges against these people. I think we need to have a very good look at the directions that they're getting from their ministers and why they haven't been putting pressure on them to act.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, I reckon you'll get your $275 power bill saving before you'll get anyone arrested on hate speech or vilification or incitement charges. Look, we've just seen an Australian man killed in Lebanon where he was fighting for Hezbollah. You've called for parts of Lebanon to be designated a no-go zone to prevent more Australians going to fight with the terror group, which seems eminently sensible. How's the government received your request? Has there been any response?
Unfortunately, the only response we've had is a very dismissive one from the Health Minister, Mark Butler, who was sent out today to say that we've already given travel advice that people shouldn't go to Lebanon, therefore that's enough. Well, that's not enough because clearly people are still travelling to Lebanon. At least one Australian has been claimed by Hezbollah as a fighter, and after he died, had a full military funeral with all the Hezbollah honours. So it's very clearly a problem, and I'm deeply concerned that there'll be more Australians who'll seek to go there. And this is a problem for us because those people will go, they'll fight, they'll become radicalised, they'll become skilled, and some of them will try and come back to this country and threaten us here at home. And so we should prevent them from leaving in the first place. And the government's got an enormous range of tools to do so, one of which is to declare an area of the world as a designated area within which, if you go, you are committing an offence because it's deemed that there's terrorist activity likely taking place there and you're likely to be participating in it. And you have to prove yourself that you're not engaging in terrorism. Now, the government has that tool available to them. They haven't taken it up, they haven't used it, but there are others as well. You can cancel people's passports. You can charge them for leaving the country to fight for a terrorist organisation. There's a range of tools available, but if they're not being used, then I'm worried that's sending the message to the community that there's no consequences for this behaviour.
Yeah, for all their talk about, security being our highest priority, this government seems to have a lot of other priorities like The Voice and taking holidays. Speaking of this government's failures, and I'll speak more about this in a moment with security and defence expert Peter Jennings, but Iran has now sent a warship to the Red Sea. Now, they say the ship is there to secure shipping lanes and repel pirates, which is hilarious when you consider it's Iran-backed Houthi rebels doing the pirating. But the government in Australia really stuffed up by not agreeing to help the United States-led coalition by sending a warship, didn't they?
I agree, James. I think the Ayatollah should appear before the next Melbourne Comedy Festival with lines like that. But you're also right that this is another weak decision on national security from the Albanese government. It's a pattern of behaviour from this government. They turn away from the tough calls. They refuse to back our allies. They refuse to back our friends. And they sit on the sidelines and they let others do the heavy lifting. And I think this is a shameful day in Australia's defence and national security policy. We could have made a tangible contribution to this UN-led coalition. We were asked to do so, but we've chosen not to do so. And I think that reflects terribly on the Prime Minister and his weak leadership. I suspect it's just because he fears what the domestic political implications would be of contributing to this. But Australia's interests are very clear here. We want the international shipping through the Red Sea to be restored. We want it to be stable because we're a trading nation. We need the open trading system to get the commodities we need to make our economy function.
Indeed. Senator James Paterson, thanks so much for your time tonight. Well, while Iran makes mischief in the Middle East and Russia continues its assault on Ukraine, Chinese President Xi Jinping has used his New Year's address to warn the world that reunification with Taiwan is inevitable.
The reunification of China is a historical inevitability, and compatriots on both sides of the Taiwan Strait should join hands and share the great glory of national rejuvenation. Our goal is grand and simple.
Joining me now is Strategic Analysis Australia Director Peter Jennings. Peter, welcome. This isn't the first time Xi Jinping has talked about reclaiming Taiwan, is it?
No, it's not. He's been saying similar language since he became president back in 2012, James. But the language has also been getting tougher as time has gone by. And there's also a string of speeches which he's giving to elements of the People's Liberation Army, their military force, where he tells them, prepare for war. And so Xi Jinping is doing absolutely everything he can to give himself the option of a military action against Taiwan. And I think the language is particularly strong now because Taiwan has their elections in just a few days. So they're doing their best to do a little bit of election interference at the same time.
So while he's talking about, reunification, I love that phrase, reunification, as if it's some, kumbaya moment. But while he's talking about that, he's also using interesting language regarding China's ties with Russia, which he described as a, quote, no limits relationship. What's he getting at there, and what does that mean for the West?
Well, this goes to the treaty that Xi Jinping signed with Vladimir Putin just before the Russian second invasion of Ukraine 18 months or so ago. And I think it's fair to say that we've not seen China and Russia as close as this since the days of the Soviet Union and the 1960s. So this is something to be, I think, seriously concerned about. For Australia, China is our number one strategic risk, but increasingly we're having to deal with what a friend of mine described as the rectangle of rat bags, China, Russia, North Korea and Iran, as being four authoritarian regimes, all with different agendas, but more than happy to work with each other in the process of sort of weakening those democracies around them.
Peter, you wrote a great piece for The Australian last week describing Labor's foreign policy and national security approach as impotent. That's a bit harsh, isn't it? On impotent people, I mean.
Well, James, and it's not fixable by taking a pill either. I mean, it's pretty clear that the government lost its mojo at about the time they realised that the Voice referendum was crashing and burning. And since that time, we're seeing, I think, a failure of the cabinet to function as a unified group. We're seeing a lot of ministers just disappear for holidays. That's partly understandable at this time of year, but governments always need to give a sense of continuing to move on. And for Anthony Albanese to turn things around, he needs to be back with energy in 2024 to try and revitalise his government. Can he do it? Well, we're all going to be talking about that. But there's a pattern I've seen really from the end of the John Howard time in Canberra, where governments come in, lose steam halfway through, claim to have then heard the voice of the people and they're going to change and do things differently. And that's at about the moment that leadership speculation starts to arise. So frankly, Albanese's got a massive job ahead of him to turn things around. And, let's see how that works in the next 6 months or so.
You would have heard me talking to Senator James Paterson just a moment ago about Australia's failure to support the American-led coalition by sending a ship to the Red Sea. We're talking about the fact that Iran have now sent a warship to that area. What do you make of that move by Iran? What are they up to at the moment? And incidentally, there's just been news from the Atomic Agency saying that Iran are now accelerating their production of enriched uranium. And it was reported in the Jerusalem Post they believe that they could convert that into nuclear-grade uranium for a weapon within 2 weeks. What are Iran up to by escalating things, do you think?
I think ever since October 7, and really in many ways long before. We've seen Iran positioning itself to become the dominant power in the Middle East. And it does that by funding and training and equipping a whole bunch of proxy entities, Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen and others, to act as agents of mischief for them. So I think we can see potentially a serious military conflict emerging on the border of Israel and Lebanon. They're exchanging fire daily, but the potential for that to become a full-on war is serious. And I think a maritime crisis in the Red Sea. And, James, contrary to everything our government has said, this is something which is pretty central to Australia's strategic interests. There are a lot of finished products that come from Europe through the Suez Straits, through the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean towards Australia and to Asia. A lot of oil and other goods go in the opposite direction. If the Red Sea is closed or the Suez Canal is closed, that is going to be a major problem to global shipping and something that profoundly impacts the Australian economy. So maybe our government will be revising how they're going to be approaching this. But it's not true to say that, sending a handful of naval officers, which is what we've done to a headquarters in Bahrain, is anywhere near in keeping with the extent of Australia's strategic interests in this problem, which is much more substantial.
Yeah, well, Anthony Albanese likes to boast about Australia's influence around the world, as indeed he travels the world. And then when it comes to something like this, we can't even send one ship. Let me ask you one more question before I let you go. The government's softly approach to these now weekly pro-Palestinian rallies that we're seeing has me concerned that we're running the risk of allowing Islamic extremism to grow in this country. And comments like this one that I'll show you in just a moment from a few weeks ago, this is an Islamic preacher in Western Sydney, does nothing to alleviate my concerns.
This has to be a spark for the Ummah, and a spark to the final solution. To unite the Muslim world under one leader, the Khalifa, the Imam, the Sultan, that implements the Sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he sends the Muslim armies to defend the lands of Islam. This is the only solution from the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Everyone has to work for this cause and for this effort in any way that you can.
So we've got incitement like that. The government are doing nothing to stop it. We've got weekly protest marches that we've all just gotten used to now. We've got public events such as Carols by Candlelight being hijacked. We've got schools, theatres, shopping centres being targeted, and no one's doing much to stop any of it. Here's my question for you. Are we walking toward or sleepwalking toward disaster here?
We're in a very high-risk situation, and it frankly is incomprehensible to me how the government has allowed itself to get into this situation. Far from letting off steam, which is a phrase I've heard used to describe why these protests are okay, what they are actually doing is acting as a way of bringing people together and saying it's okay to radicalise because, look, no one's stopping us from doing it. And indeed, no one may have been allowing people to travel overseas to join Hezbollah. So I think, again, as we come back into the new year, the government potentially has got a serious crisis on its hands, both for Australians wanting to travel overseas to join terrorist organisations. We can't allow that because their intent then is to go off and kill Jews or enable people to kill Jews, or to radicalise in Australia, which gives rise to a return of the counter-terrorism problem that we were dealing with for so many years. And this kind of, relaxed approach which government is taking to it, I find incomprehensible. That's going to have to change in the next few weeks.
Peter Jennings, thank you so much for your time tonight. Well, after the break, if you were in any doubt about just how woke universities are, wait until you see students agreeing to donate money to kill innocent Jews. The shocking footage after this. Welcome back. Now, if you want more proof of just how anti-Semitic society is becoming, check out this. Ami Horowitz asked university students in San Francisco if they'd donate money to help kill Jews. Have a look at the response.
We have to hit these people hard.
Yeah.
And we want to fund operations against soft targets. Schools, hospitals, Jewish cafes, hospitals, Jewish schools, Jewish buses, synagogues, that kind of thing. Targets that can make them really feel it, attack, blow things up, blow shit up.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
we have to strike back.
Yeah.
We can't.
No, I definitely agree.
All we have are rockets and suicide bombers and that kind of thing.
People are evil in these worlds, so you know what I mean.
That's what we have to strike back.
Reasons. Yeah, most definitely.
So you think it's economic, or you think it's the religion motivating them?
I think it's a mix.
Keeping them controlled with like genocide. A lot of people think they're superior to others, you know what I mean? So they think
They're superior?
Yeah, a lot of them think that.
Jew-premacy?
I think their behavior and the actions are evil. It says they want the land. It's a money.
I mean, you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
About hitting these targets.
Yes.
I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. But I like what you're saying.
I would love to help.
You want us to spread the word too?
Spread the word for sure. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
God bless you.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't have money to give, but if you need word of
But
mouth,
moral support you can give me.
Yeah.
And just spread the message.
Like promotions, like putting on a story or something.
How much money would you be able to do? It's tax deductible.
A couple bucks.
Like $5.
Also $5? Like $5.
$5?
But yeah, 5, 10.
Probably like $5.
$5 is great. 10?
Yeah, like 5 to 10. Like $15 right now.
Say $15.
That'd be amazing.
Like $15, $20 probably.
That'd be great.
Cool 20.
20? Yeah. Come on, brother. Come on, brother.
I don't really have a job right now, so
okay.
I would do like maybe $20.
$20.
I'd do 20.
$20.
Or 30?
That'd be amazing.
Yeah.
Unbelievable stuff. Joining me now is the filmmaker behind this shocking video, Ami Horowitz. Ami, our Sky News audience knows you pretty well and they know you're a proud Jewish man. So before we talk about what we just saw, tell me about why you decided to do it in the first place and make that video.
Yeah, and by the way, you know, look, I made that video. I was there. I've seen it a million times. Every time I see that, I can't believe what I'm watching. I have to shake my head in shock. Look, anti-Semitism, as your audience knows, and as many people in the world know, has been really increasing precipitously over the last few months, particularly, well, really over the last, I would say, 10 years. But we've seen a significant ramp up after October 7th, which is shocking because Israel and Jews were the victims of those attacks. And what I think you're really seeing are people's true colors coming out. But I wanted to make sure people understood that this isn't really about the Israeli conflict. This is really about Israel. It's really about, and on one level, the Jews themselves, right? And remember, during that video, I was not raising money to even like blow up Israel, Israelis, Jewish Israelis, which is bad enough. I specifically said Jews in America and around the world, across Europe. And, sometimes I sit on my couch and I'm drinking some scotch and I'm coming up with a video idea. And this is one of those videos I'm like, I hope this is one of those videos that just doesn't work, right? I just hope that this total fail and people say, you're an insane person, I'm calling the police. Not one person did that. People oftentimes say, well, did you cherry pick? At the end of the video, I give the numbers. Almost a majority of people I spoke to who engaged with me offered me money to murder Jews, actually offered me money to kill Jews. And the vast majority of people who I spoke to, if they didn't give me money, supported the idea, because what we're doing is we're really uncovering the dark side of the hard left. And that's why I picked people. I went to SFSU, San Francisco State University, a school of the hard left. And that's where they're fed this garbage that Jews are oppressors, right? The oppressor-oppressed matrix. Jews, the oppressors, therefore they have taken from other people. There's no limiting principle. Then why not kill them? They're beasts, right? All they do is take. That's the blood libel they've been sold. And here's the end result.
You said that most were supportive and most offered you money to kill Jews. Did a single person call the police on you or tell you to go to hell?
I wish I could say yes. I would love to say yes. And I know that it was the converse. And if I was on the street and somebody came up to me and said, hey, I want to raise money to kill random poor Muslim people across the world, if I wouldn't punch them, which I probably would, to be honest, I would absolutely call the police, the FBI. This man is evil and raising money to murder people. That's illegal. No, they didn't. I would love to say they did. It breaks my heart to say they didn't. It really does. But no.
Obviously, this says a lot about the hatred that people have, But what does it say about the education system? And this is a university, right? So you've got uni students. These are our future leaders. Where are they getting their information from? Are they only ever watching TikTok? Is that where they get their education from?
Yeah, this is a major university in the United States. And the answer is partly yes, sure. They're getting it from the hateful TikTok app, but they're also getting it from the professors and the administrators. And this is nothing new, right? This idea of oppressor oppressed, right? The intersectional pyramid that we've been seeing taught, by definition, they put, again, it's not really true, but they put Jews at the top of that pyramid. This is stuff they've been preaching for years. I did a video which actually led to an executive order, and I'm proud to say that now schools can sue for anti-Semitism because this video I did and the president signing an executive order as a result. I went to Duke and University of North Carolina, two massive universities I'm sure all of your viewers have heard of. I was videotaping secretly. And the main event, the main entertainment for this conference was a Palestinian rapper who rapped about how much he hates Jews. He kept saying to the audience, you guys aren't being anti-Semitic enough. This is a major university with professors and administrators and students, and they got up and they were cheering and they were clapping. This is nothing new from the hard left. We've been seeing this for years. It is garbage in, garbage out. They're just taking it to the next level, and I'm just exposing it.
What I couldn't believe when I watched that video, and I've watched that video a few times too, and like you, every time I watched it, I just could not believe what I was hearing. But you actually tell students you want to raise money for, and I quote, to blow stuff up and to pay suicide bombers to launch attacks, and they don't even shrug their shoulders. They're like, here's $5, here's $20.
You know, it's, I also want to be clear about something. This is really, and if you did they don't really, why do they hate the Jews, right? Is it the Jews specifically? And the answer is not exactly. They don't hate Jews because they keep kosher or the Sabbath. They see Jews as a proxy of the West, right? They see Jews as a subsegment of the successful West. And that's what they hate the most. If you did a Venn diagram between the people that I talk to who hate Jews, hate Israel, and the ones who hate America and the West, the diagram would be the exact same circle, right? Yeah. That's really what it is. They see Jews as a particular subgroup of people who are particularly successful within a larger group of the West who have been successful. And in the world they live in, if you've been successful, you have a piece of the pie. The only way you kind of gotten that piece of pie is taking it from somebody else. It's a static economic system, whereas you take one, you take from somewhere else. And that's ultimately what it comes down to. If you really boil down to it, it is in fact Marxism. That's what it really is. And they see Jews as capitalists and therefore Jews as the enemy.
Ami Horowitz, it's a shocking video, but I appreciate you for bringing it to our attention and I appreciate your time tonight. Well, after the break, Ukraine is pleading for Australia to send coal to help them make it through winter, but it seems the Australian government is going to leave them out in the cold. More after this. Well, news today that Ukraine has requested coal from Australia to help civilians survive winter. Well, thank goodness our coal can help someone, since we're increasingly denied the opportunity to use it. Now, the Morrison government gifted Ukraine 70,000 tonnes of coal to help provide electricity back in 2022. It was part of a humanitarian package from Australia. There's a phrase I bet you thought you'd never hear, coal and humanitarian in the same sentence. What I don't understand is why the Ukrainian government requested coal rather than, say, solar panels or wind turbines. Anyway, it was revealed today that Ukraine's ambassador to Australia put in a request to the Albanese government back on December 5th and is still waiting for a response. Joining me to discuss this is Queensland Liberal MP Garth Hamilton and former Liberal MP and Sky News contributor Nicole Flint. Nicole, winter in Ukraine will be over by the time our government gets around to replying to their ambassador.
Look, you've got to wonder and we've got to hope that maybe the war will be over before the Australian government bothers to give the Ukraine government the courtesy of a response. And I just think this is absolute peak virtue signalling from the federal Labor government. I am guessing they are far more concerned about inner city green votes than they are about human safety and human comfort in the Ukraine in the depths of winter. I just think this is appalling that they haven't given them the courtesy of a response, and more so, haven't just sent the coal over as the Morrison government did. We should be, I hope all electors in Australia are paying close attention to this, because this is what you can expect from Labor. Green inner city votes are more important than helping out people in need.
That's sure the way it seems. Well, today it's been revealed there's been not a terror attack, God forbid, a cyber attack on the Victorian court system, with criminals getting access to sensitive videos that were used in trials. Court Services Victoria has released a statement revealing it was alerted to the incident on 21st of December. Nicole, Russian hackers are suspected to be behind this attack. I should say they're smart to target Victoria, because if they're ever apprehended, the Victorian courts will likely let them off. But this is concerning, isn't it? The courts being hacked by Russian criminals?
It's very concerning, and I would hope that the full force of the law and the courts would absolutely find in favour of Australians in this instance, James. What we have seen recently, though, especially federal Labor, so the good mates of the Victorian Labor government, is this obsessive focus on things like the disinformation and misinformation bill and trying to censor the Australian media, the Australian people. And we know that here, us on Sky will be the major targets if Labor get this terrible bill through, rather than the real enemy, which is international hackers, whether it's coming from China, whether it's coming from Russia, the federal government in particular, but supported by Labor governments, state Labor governments, as they are at the moment, mainly, well, in every state and territory apart from Tasmania, should be backing up their federal colleagues, and not even that, demanding that they take action on cybersecurity, and that is the key focus, not trying to censor people, having a public policy debate like we are here this evening and sharing our opinions on key issues of the day.
Yeah, I agree absolutely. Garth, this isn't the only major cyber attack in recent months. We had St Vincent's Health Network, that was hit in December. Millions had their records stolen in attacks on organisations including Medibank and Optus. Seems like a great time for the government to, come up with a digital ID where we store all of our information centrally on government computers?
I think it's a good time to take the issue very seriously, is what it is. We've seen this happen a number of times now, unfortunately, mostly in the private sector, but to see our judicial systems compromised by a cyber threat is absolutely very concerning. And Nicole's right to point out the government's focused on the wrong things, worried about dissent, worried about people having a different point of view to them. What we have here is foreign actors engaging in, quite frankly, very, very dangerous abuse of our data privacy online. And I think it's about time we start to see that leadership from the government on this issue.
Just remaining in Victoria, the Australian reported that more than a third of the state's Labor MPs, this is in Victoria, more than a third of the state's Labor MPs don't live in their electorates. Instead, many are choosing to live in upmarket suburbs, far away from the people they're elected to represent. According to The Australian, 20 of Labor's 56 lower house MPs and 5 of their 15 upper house MPs live outside their electorates. Nicole, how can these MPs represent voters when they don't even live in the community or even close to the people they're elected to represent?
Well, they can't. And this is classic Chardonnay socialism. We are on the side of the workers. We're for the workers. We're for the battlers. We just don't want to live next door to them. We certainly don't want to shop with them. We'll turn up to our electorate office, once a week. Maybe they turn up every day, but they're not living there with their families. They're not in those communities every single day. I think it's appalling. I think it is really important that MPs live in their electorate. I certainly did the entire time I was the member for Boothby. The only excuse for not living in your electorate is if you've had a boundary redistribution through no fault of your own and the Australian or State Electoral Commission changes the boundaries so your home is no longer in your electorate. But we see this all the time with Labor. We certainly see it a lot here in South Australia. I think it's terrible. I think it should change, and I think they should be ashamed of themselves.
Garth, compared to Labor, the Victorian Liberals, they only had 4 of their 27 lower house MPs and 2 of their 11 upper house MPs living outside their electorates. So does this explain why Labor is so out of touch with voters in Victoria, and maybe this correlates throughout the rest of the country?
But maybe this is why we're seeing disenfranchisement with Labor and its traditional voting base. We saw blue-collar voters have been deserting the Albanese Labor government, and I'm sure we're going to see that across the state as they continue to disassociate themselves from the people that they're supposed to represent. I'm very proud with the LNP. Part of our pre-selection process is that we are residents within the electorate we seek to serve. I think that sends a strong message to the electorate that we're here to listen, to be a part of the community we want to represent, and to take those voices to Parliament. If Labor continues to be a top-down, union-driven organisation, it's going to continue to lose that crucial support that it once had back when it was old Labor representing working people.
Yeah, well, the polls are certainly showing that's the way things are headed. I want to go back to a story I mentioned earlier in the program. 2 more asylum seekers who were released after the High Court ruled against indefinite detention. They've been arrested. Garth, the government made a mess of this last year. Are we just having more of the same in 2024?
It appears we're going to have exactly the same process go on, where unfortunately these people continue to get arrested. But the government made a big deal, you might remember this, about introducing the preventative detention laws. They wanted to show that they were big and tough. We had Claire O'Neill getting out and talking about how she was every bit as strong as Peter Dutton. They've not used those laws. They've not used those laws since at all. In fact, after that big show and that travesty, quite frankly, of the democratic system, rushing it through on a non-sitting day and almost gagging debate, they've not used those laws. So we're going to continue to see the same things happen in 2024 as we did in 2023. Sadly, more and more of these people are likely to be arrested should they commit these crimes.
Yeah, on a lighter note, just before we finish, we all loved watching the fireworks on New Year's Eve to ring in 2024, but I wonder if we're losing our ability to just, live in the moment. I want both of you to have a look at this clip. This is from New Year's Eve in Paris. Have a look. All right, I want to get a response from both of you to this. I didn't notice the fireworks for all the iPhones being held up. Garth, what does this say about current culture?
I don't think it says too many good things. I mean, but I point out, I'd say that staring into a camera myself right now, so they can be terribly useful. They've become all-encompassing parts of our life. But it's nice to be able to stop every now and then and smell the roses.
Nicole, are we living the ability to just enjoy the moment and be present?
Yep, absolutely. And I just think that's so sad. And honestly, the quality of recording that you get off of your phone in a big crowd, whether it's at a concert or watching the fireworks, is so inferior to just being present in the moment and watching the fireworks. On New Year's Eve, I was very lucky to see some fireworks down in my little part of country South Australia, and we all stood there on the balcony and we just watched them.
Good on you. Well, Garth Hamilton and Nicole Flint, thank you very much for your time and Happy New Year. After the break, more reasons why the government should lift its ban on nuclear energy. The support for nuclear power is growing. More about that after this. Welcome back. Well, the push for Australia to lift the ban on nuclear energy has ramped up this week, with former federal Treasurer Peter Costello throwing his support behind nuclear to provide a new domestic energy source and to help reduce carbon emissions. It comes as new figures show nuclear is the second most preferred electricity source after solar, beating out wind farms. Joining me now is Nuclear for Australia founder Will Shackle. Will, this endorsement by Peter Costello really just adds more pressure on the government, doesn't it?
Well, I think importantly, people from all sides of politics support nuclear energy, whether it's Peter Costello or the majority of Q&A's audience, 59%, who say they supported nuclear energy when I was on that program, or even going as far as individuals within the Labor Party and also people who vote for the Labor Party, a majority of them also supporting nuclear energy. So it's clear that regardless of your politics, most Australians support nuclear energy, and that's incredibly encouraging to see.
We'll look at some figures in just a moment, but do you think there's going to be a change in government policy? I mean, obviously the tide is turning. Is it turning enough that in this term or going into the next election you think Labor would change their minds on this issue, or are they set in stone against it?
Well, I'm really hopeful and optimistic that the majority of Australians do support nuclear energy, including those who are supporting their government. So I really do hope that they look at the science, look at the facts that are resoundingly clear about nuclear energy, know it is the most, and get back on track to reaching our emissions targets, because currently we're not on track to reach them. I think that we should have a framework where we are considering all options on the table, and I think that has to include nuclear energy. At the moment, unfortunately, our politicians are ignoring the will of the people. They're ignoring the science, ignoring the global evidence of nuclear being an effective pathway to net zero. But if they're going to open their minds up to all of those facts and to all of that evidence, I hope that they'll therefore change their mind and make their first priority to lift the ban on nuclear energy.
Well, I mentioned in the opening that there's new figures from Radiant Energy. They did a survey of people across 20 countries. I'll show you a graph of the results. And as you'll see on this graph, nuclear has strong support. That's nuclear in the pink. Solar is in the yellow. Now, that's the favourite source for people. But it shows that there's not much opposition to nuclear, certainly not as much as was once thought. Let me give you another graph here. And that shows that more people support using nuclear rather than opposing it. In Australia alone, 41% support using nuclear compared to 36% against. So, as you said earlier, it definitely shows people's attitudes are starting to turn. They're starting to realise it is a cheap form of energy and it's not as dangerous as they've been made out to believe. Do you remember, Will, when Adam Bandt talked about nuclear submarines would be a Chernobyl just off the coast of Australia. And so you can imagine people getting fearful of nuclear reactors in this country. But people are starting to dismiss that sort of fear-mongering, aren't they?
They certainly are. And I think one of the most important and telling statistics within that survey was the fact that when people were asked if Australia was to focus on one energy source, which one they should focus on, 23% said nuclear, whilst only 15% said wind, which technically means that wind is less popular than nuclear energy, which I think is really incredible statistic. From my point of view, we should be embracing all clean energy options in order for us to get to net zero, and importantly, to make sure that we keep electricity bills down and energy reliable at the same time. But Australians are certainly not buying into the
I think we've lost Will there. He's on holidays on the Sunshine Coast and we've lost him. But I tell you what, that young man, he's 17 years old. He's had a huge year. He was at the climate conference in Dubai. He got an exclusive interview with the French president that went worldwide. Dick Smith's thrown his support behind him. So I don't know what you do when you've peaked at age 17, but he's having incredible influence and he makes a lot of sense as well. Hey, by the way, there is a website where you can go and sign up your support for nuclear power. The website is nuclearforaustralia.com, so you can go there and register your support. Well, that's it from me. I'll be back tomorrow night, but coming up in just a moment is an encore of Piers Morgan's interview with Prime Minister of Australia, Anthony Albanese.